People ask me sometimes what it feels like to hold a secret for half a century without knowing it was a secret at all. I never have a good answer for that. I just tell them about the quilt. I made it in the winter of 1974. I was 26 years old, living in a rented farmhouse out on Caldwell Road with my husband Danny, and a wood stove that ate through cordwood like it had a grudge. We didn't have much. We had each other, a half-broke pickup truck, and a dog named Hector, who slept on the porch even in January. That was about the sum of it, and at 26 I thought it was plenty. The patch turned up in late November, maybe a week before Thanksgiving. I was walking the road's edge, looking for the mail, which the carrier sometimes dropped short of our box when the mud was bad, and I saw it lying in the frozen grass along the shoulder. A piece of leather about the size of my hand. It had a shape sewn into it in black and gold thread, something like a set of crossed anchors over a flame, and around the edge, words I couldn't fully read because the stitching on one side had pulled loose. I could make out two, iron vow. The leather was stiff from the cold but not rotten. Somebody had made it carefully. Somebody had cared about it. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table and waited to see if anyone would come looking. Nobody did. A week passed. Then two. I asked around at the feed store and the diner in town and got nothing but shrugs. So I did what women in that county did with things that were too good to throw away and too mysterious to display. I sewed it into the quilt I was piecing together for the bedroom, right in the center panel, leather face up, so the design showed through like a window. It made the quilt heavier in that one spot, and I liked that. It felt like ballast. Danny was gone by March of 1975. A pickup truck, a slick road, a telephone pole on Route 9. He was 28. We had been married 4 years, and I did not know for a long time afterward what to do with the shape of a life that had been built for two. I stayed on the farm. I kept working. I kept the quilt. 50 years is a long time to carry something you don't understand. But I was never carrying it on purpose. It was just there, on the bed through 30 winters and 20 summers after that, draped over the porch railing when the weather was fine, because I liked the way it caught the light. The iron vow patch faded some. The leather softened. The gold thread went to something closer to cream, but the shape of it never left. Crossed anchors over a flame. I thought of it sometimes as Danny's, in the way you start to think of everything in a house as belonging to the person who is no longer in it. The biker stopped on a Tuesday in late August 2 summers ago. I was on the porch with my coffee, watching the light come across the field, when I heard an engine slow on Caldwell Road and turn into the gravel drive. He was a big man, somewhere in his late 50s, wearing a leather vest with patches down both sides and a beard going silver at the jaw. He took his helmet off and held it at his side and asked, very politely, if he could trouble me for some water. His bike had been running hot. I told him to sit, and I went inside for a glass and the pitcher I keep cold in the refrigerator. When I came back out, he was standing at the porch railing, very still, looking at the quilt I'd draped there that morning to air out in the breeze. He wasn't touching it. He was just looking at it, the way you look at something you were afraid you'd never see again. I set the pitcher on the rail and asked him if he was all right. He didn't answer right away. He reached out and put 2 fingers very lightly on the patch in the center of the quilt, on the crossed anchors and the faded flame, and I watched his throat move. "Where did you get this?" he said. I told him. The road's edge. November of 1974. The frozen grass and the stiff leather and the careful stitching coming loose on one side. I told him I'd asked around and nobody claimed it, so I put it in the quilt because it was too fine to waste. He stood there for a long moment with his hand resting near the patch but not on it, like he was warming himself at something. Then he said, quietly, "Ma'am, do you know what club this is?" I told him I knew the 2 words I could read. Iron vow. He nodded slowly. He said that was his club, that it had been his club for 31 years, that the patch I was looking at was a founding chapter patch, the kind that went to the men who were there at the very beginning, before the club had chapters or bylaws or a name anyone outside a single county knew. He said there were only ever 12 of those patches made, and 11 of them were accounted for. The 12th had been lost in the fall of 1974, and they had never been able to say for certain where it went. I asked him whose it was. He took a breath. He told me the name of the man who had worn it. He said it slowly, watching my face. I had not heard that name spoken out loud in a very long time. I sat down in my porch chair because my legs asked me to. His name was Daniel Roy Marsh, my Danny. He had been a founding brother of the Iron Vow MC before I ever knew him. Before we met at a county fair in the summer of 1970, before he put away his vest and his Harley because he said he wanted something quieter, something that lasted, he had never told me, I did not know, for 50 years, that the man I married had once been one of 12 men who built something from nothing out of loyalty and road dust and a shared idea about what it meant to keep your word. The biker, his name was Walt, and he was the club's current road captain, sat with me on that porch for 2 hours. He told me things about Danny that I had never known, and things that made the man I knew make a different kind of sense. He drank 3 glasses of water and didn't say much after a while, because there wasn't much left that needed saying. Before he left, he asked if he could make a phone call. I told him to go ahead. 2 days later, on a Thursday morning, I heard them before I saw them. A low, steady sound coming up Caldwell Road from the south, building the way a storm builds, and then the first of them turned into my gravel drive, and then the next and the next after that. 72 riders. They came in slowly, 2 by 2, and they filled the drive and lined the road's shoulder on both sides, and some of them pulled onto the grass at the field's edge, and they cut their engines one by one until the quiet that followed was the deepest quiet I had heard in years. Walt came to the porch steps. He had a man on his left who he introduced as the club president, and a woman on his right who turned out to be the club's historian, and she was carrying a leather case. The president took off his helmet and held it in both hands and looked at me and said they had come because a founding brother's widow deserved to be known. He said that Danny's name was on the wall of their chapter house, and that his patch, if I was willing, belonged back with the club or with me as I chose. He said that either way, they wanted me to know that the Iron Vow did not forget its own. I looked out at 72 men and women sitting on their bikes in my gravel drive, with their engines quiet and their hands in their laps, waiting. I told them Danny would have loved this. I told them he would have pretended he didn't, and then he would have loved every second of it. A few of them laughed at that, the way you laughed when something is true and also hurts a little. I kept the patch. I told them that. It had been in my quilt for 50 years and it would stay there until I was done needing it. But I asked if they would come back sometime, and Walt said they would, and I believed him. They started their engines in a long rolling wave and pulled out of my drive the same way they had come, in 2 by 2, until the road was empty and quiet again, and all that was left was the smell of the morning and the sound of the field and the quilt on the porch railing, moving a little in the August breeze. I have thought about that patch 1,000 times in the years since Danny died. I never understood why I kept it. I sewed it into that quilt because it was too carefully made to leave in the cold, and because it felt like it belonged to someone who had taken care of something that mattered, and I have always believed that things made with that kind of care deserve to be treated the same way. I suppose I was right about that. I just didn't know, for 50 years, that the something it belonged to was him.